Battleship Andrei Pervozvanny, 1906. Continuation, beginning in number 9 to 12, 1971, and number 1 to 4, 1972, edited by the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the USSR Navy, Admiral N.N. Amelko. Chapter 1. In the Shadow of the Tsugaru Tragedy. St. Petersburg, Spring 1905. The Bells of St. Petersburg's churches tolled dully for the fallen heroes of Tsushima, even as the keel of a new battleship was being laid on the slipways of the new Admiralty shipyard. The irony of history was that a ship named in honor of Saint Andrew I, called the patron saint of the Russian fleet, was beginning its life at a moment of the greatest humiliation for Russian naval power. In those April days of 1905, when Admiral Rozhestvensky was leading his squadron towards its fateful encounter off Tsushima Island, preparations were already underway in St. Petersburg for the laying down of a new battleship. It might seem paradoxical to continue building ships of the same type that had just proven their vulnerability in battles with the Japanese fleet, but the logic of the Imperial Russian state machinery had its own inexorable consistency. The historical context of its creation was dramatic. After the loss of the 1st Pacific Squadron at Port Arthur and the destruction of the 2nd at Tsushima, the Russian fleet found itself in a state of deep crisis. However, the Naval Ministry, without waiting for the war to end or its lessons to be analyzed, had already presented Nicholas II with a new 10-year shipbuilding program in 1904. The slipways of the Galerny Island section of the Admiralty shipyard and the Baltic Yard, which had become free after the completion of the Borodino-class battleships, could not be left idle. The shipbuilding industry needed orders. Thus, the Andrei Pervozvanny was born not so much out of strategic necessity, but from economic and industrial expediency. Its keel laying on April 28, 1905, a month before the Battle of Tsushima, symbolized the Russian Naval Command's belief that the fleet must be built continuously, regardless of current setbacks. Chapter 2. The Project. Between Past and Future. 2.1. Genesis of the idea. The project's origins went back to 1902, when the State Controller, General P.L. Lobko, expressed concerns in his report about a potential reduction in the production activity of shipbuilding enterprises. By 1903, of all the slipways at the Baltic Yard, the new Admiralty, and Galerny Island, only one was expected to remain occupied, the one where the squadron battleship Slava was being built. The concern of these high officials was conveyed to Emperor Nicholas II, who on October 29, 1902, ordered the situation to be discussed at a special conference. The result was the allocation of 12 million rubles for 1903 and the same amount for 1904. Financial matters were settled, but a problem arose. Which ships should be built? A conference on December 20, 1902, chaired by the Chief of the Main Naval Staff, Vice Admiral F.K. Avalon, determined the main parameters. The Borodino-class battleships, then under construction in a series, were adopted as the prototype, but with the caliber of the secondary artillery increased to 203 millimeters, a transition already begun in foreign fleets, and improved explosion safety for the boilers. However, calculations showed that simply strengthening the armament would lead to a significant increase in displacement and would essentially require creating a new project. Time was of the essence. Construction needed to start no later than March 1, 1903. 2.2. Two projects. 2. MTK versus Skvortsov. On January 17, 1903, two competing projects were presented to the main naval staff. The project of the Naval Technical Committee, MTK, featuring a longitudinal armored bulkhead set 4.87 meters from the side. The project of the chief naval engineer of St. Petersburg Port, D.V. Skvortsov, featuring an increased number of transverse bulkheads and longitudinal bulkheads, placed 2.44 meters from the side. The differences were fundamental. While the MTK relied on a single, powerful protection layer, Skvortsov preferred a system of multiple compartments. The placement of the boilers also differed. Skvortsov placed them on foundations directly on the inner bottom, while the MTK proposed raising them to a height of 2.44 meters with shell magazines located beneath them. On January 27, 1903, at a representative meeting, P.P. Tirtov announced Nicholas II's decision to build 2 squadron battleships of an improved Borodino type with a displacement of up to 16,500 tons. In effect, a compromise was adopted, incorporating elements from both projects. 2.3. Technical specifications, ambitions, and realities. On January 30, 1903, D.V. Skvortsov was ordered to submit a project by May 1st with the following specifications: displacement, no more than 16,500 tons, speed, at least 18 knots, draft, no more than 7.93 meters, armament, 4 times 305 millimeters, 12 times 203 millimeters, 20 by 75 millimeters, 20 by 47 millimeters, 6 by 37 millimeter guns, 5 underwater and 1 above water torpedo tubes. But problems began immediately. The factories designing the 203 millimeter turrets exceeded the estimated weight by 237 tons. The proposal to install 305 millimeter guns with 50 caliber barrels was rejected due to weight constraints. A critical issue was the freeboard height. To improve stability, Skvortsov proposed reducing it by 1 deck, but this could worsen seaworthiness. A vote among specialists was split, 9 for increasing the height by 0.3 meters, 11 against. The question remained open. Chapter 3. Construction. The slow birth of a giant. 3.1. Keel. Laying in the midst of war. The keel-laying ceremony for the Andrei Pervozvanny took place on April 28, 1905, on the slipway of the new Admiralty. An irony of fate. At that very moment, Rozhestvensky's squadron had already entered the Tsushima Strait. The builder appointed was junior shipbuilder V.A. Afanasyev. For its sister ship, the Imperator Pavel I, the official keel laying took place on October 27, 1905, at the Baltic Yard. Its builder was senior shipbuilder V.K. Offenberg. Initial problems appeared immediately. The stem for the Andrei Pervozvanny was successfully cast by the Putilov plant, but for the Imperator Pavel I, it had to be made in 2 parts. No enterprise in St. Petersburg could manufacture a single casting of the required size at a reasonable price. 3.2. Lessons of Tsushima. Redesigning on the fly. The Tsushima disaster forced a radical revision of the project. 17 modernization variants were considered, incorporating the best solutions from each. New British system of structural protection, American-style cage masts, and for the Imperator Pavel I, Zhukov's hyperboloid masts, a world first, improved fire control system, German-style armor system, new design hull anchors. The main changes involved replacing the 152 millimeter guns with 203 millimeter guns, strengthening the armor, 95% of the above water area was covered by armor, abandoning portholes to maintain the integrity of the armored protection, creating a system of 11 watertight compartments. The revisions were only completed in January 1908, costing over 700,000 rubles, a huge sum for that time. 3.3. Launch and fitting out. On October 7, 1906, the anniversary of the Battle of Tsushima, the Andrei Pervozvanny was launched. The ceremony took place in an atmosphere of deep concern for the future of the Russian fleet. Fitting out a float dragged on for 6 long years. Reasons included constant modifications based on the analysis of the war difficulties with the delivery of armament and machinery, financial problems in the post-war period, technical improvements introduced during construction. Only on April 30, 1912, 7 years after its keel was laid, did the ship officially enter service. During this time, the world had witnessed the emergence of HMS Dreadnought, 1906, and the beginning of the Dreadnought race. Chapter 4. Design Features. The Last Breath of an Era. 4.1. Hull and Architecture. The Andrei Pervozvanny embodied the transitional architecture from pre-dreadnoughts to dreadnoughts. Main dimensions: length, 140.2 meters, beam, 24.4 meters, draft, 8.5 meters, displacement, 18,590 tons, full load. Design features: straight sides, unlike the tumble home of French prototypes. Ram bow, a relic of the ramming tactics era, low freeboard to improve stability. No portholes in the armored belt. The unsinkability system was revolutionary for its time. 11 main watertight compartments, 17 main transverse bulkheads, anti-torpedo bulkhead double bottom along the entire length, 4.2. Armor, a steel fortress. Armor protection was the ship's strongest feature. Main armor scheme, main belt, 79 to 216 millimeters, Krupp armor. Upper belt, 127 millimeters. Casemates for 120 millimeter guns. 127 millimeters main gun turrets, 63.5 to 254 millimeters secondary gun turrets, 50.8 to 177.8 millimeters. Conning tower, 102 to 203 millimeters decks. 31.7 to 39.6 millimeters with 38.1 millimeter slopes. The total weight of armor constituted 35% of the displacement, an outstanding figure. The armored belt ran the entire length of the ship from stem to stern and from keel to upper deck. Innovative solutions, abandonment of wooden backing when attaching armor, improved system for fastening armor plates, full armor coverage for casemates, including roofs, 4.3. Power plant, anachronism in iron. Here lay the project's main weakness. Power plant composition: 2 vertical triple expansion steam engines, 25 Belleville boilers without economizers. Power: 17,635 horsepower, contractual 17,600 horsepower. Speed: 18.5 knots, designed 18 knots. Range: 2,100 miles, at 12 knots. Problems: obsolete reciprocating engines in the age of turbines. Low efficiency of Belleville boilers. Insufficient speed for modern line-of-battle combat, limited range for oceanic operations. Fleet Mechanical Engineer AI. Pogodin later noted, "The engines of the Andrei Pervozvanny were good for 1900 but not for 1912. We were building yesterday's technology while the world was already living in tomorrow." 4.4. Armament, power, and diversity. The armament represented a compromise between power and uniformity. Main armament, 4 times 305 mm/40, Obukov plant guns, range, 110 cables at 35 degrees elevation, rate of fire, 1.2 rounds per minute. Ammunition, 240 shells plus 72 practice secondary armament, 14 times 203 mm/50. 8 guns in 4 twin-gun turrets, 6 guns in casemates range, 95 cables, ammunition, 1,540 shells plus 252 practice anti-torpedo boat armament, 12 by 120 mm/45. Kanay guns. Model 1891. Range 65 cables. Ammunition 2,400 shells plus 228 practice torpedo armament, 4 by 457 mm underwater tubes, 24 torpedoes. Fire control, 2 rangefinders with 4.57 meters base central artillery post, 2 radio stations, Telefunken and Naval Ministry. The problem of mixed calibers was the main tactical drawback. As Captain First Rank PV Rimsky-Korsakov noted, the variety of calibers complicates fire control, reduces firing effectiveness, and complicates ammunition supply. Chapter 5. Service, the triumph that never was 5.1. Entry into service and first years. On April 30th, 1912, the Andrei Pervozvanny officially joined the Baltic Fleet. By this time, it was already obsolete. In England, Orion-class super-dreadnoughts were being built. In Germany, Moltke-class battlecruisers. In Russia, Sevastopol-class dreadnoughts had been laid down. The first commander was Captain First Rank A.F. Schwank. The crew numbered 957, 31 officers, 26 warrant officers, 900 enlisted men. The years 1912 to 1914 were spent in intensive combat training, artillery firings in the Gulf of Finland, maneuvers with other ships of the Baltic Fleet, joint exercises with ground forces, diplomatic visits to ports in Sweden and Germany. 5.2. World War I. Guard duty. With the start of the war in August 1914, the Andrei Pervozvanny became part of the 1st Brigade of battleships of the Baltic Fleet. Primary tasks, covering mine-laying operations, defense of the Gulf of Finland, support for light forces, deterrence against the German fleet. Key operations, August 1914, covering mine-laying at the mouth of the Gulf of Finland. November 1914, participation in repelling a raid by German cruisers. July 1915, artillery support during the defense of the Gulf of Riga. October 1915. Covering the evacuation of troops from the coast, its tactical role was determined by its limited capabilities. Low speed precluded participation in active operations. Obsolete armament was inferior to new German ships. Its main function was as a floating battery for base defense, Captain First Rank G.O. Gadd, who commanded the ship from 1915 to 1917, reported, "The Andrei Pervozvanny can successfully defend bases but is unsuitable for offensive operations. Its place is in the second line." 5.3. Combat engagements. Despite the cautious tactics, the ship participated in several combat episodes. On August 2, 1915, it exchanged fire with German cruisers near the Irben Strait. The Russian battleships, including the Andrei Pervozvanny, forced the enemy to withdraw with their fire. On October 14, 1915, it repelled an attack by German destroyers on a convoy. Fire from its 120mm guns damaged one of the attacking ships. A constant feature of its service was the mine danger. In 1915 alone, the ship changed its position 7 times due to the threat of minefields. Chapter 6. Revolution and Civil War. 6.1. The February Revolution. February 1917 found the Andrei Pervozvanny in Helsingfors, Helsinki. Revolutionary events unfolded on the ship, as throughout the fleet. March 1st, Ship's Committee created March 3rd. Crew adopted a resolution supporting the provisional government. March 15th, election of a new commander, Captain Second Rank Führer I. Lodizhensky. A notable feature was that relative discipline was maintained longer than on other ships. Officers and sailors jointly maintained order. 6.2. The October Revolution. On November 7, 1917, the Andrei Pervozvanny became part of the Red Baltic Fleet. The transition was relatively peaceful. Most officers remained at their posts. From November 1917 to March 1918, the ship served in Helsingfors, maintaining order in the port and protecting against possible attack by German forces. 6.3. The Ice Campaign, April 5th to 10th, 1918, the most heroic episode in the ship's history. As part of the operation to save the Baltic Fleet, the Andrei Pervozvanny made the transit from Helsingfors to Kronstadt. Transit conditions: ice thickness, up to 60 centimeters temperature, minus 15 degrees Celsius. Threat from German troops, shortage of coal and food. Operation leader, Chief of Naval Forces of the Baltic Sea, A.M. Shastny. Significance: preserving one of the few combat-capable large ships for Soviet Russia. 6.4. Civil War 1918 to 1919 saw active participation in combat. In July 1919, it participated in suppressing the mutiny at Fort Krasnaya Gorka. Fire from its 305mm guns destroyed the rebels' fortifications. It was part of the active detachment of ships, DOT, with the Andrei Pervozvanny becoming the flagship of the detachment defending the approaches to Petrograd. 6.5. Torpedo attack of August 18, 1919. A fateful day in the ship's history. At 23:15, 8 British torpedo boats attacked Kronstadt. Course of the attack: boats penetrated the harbor under cover of darkness. The Andrei Pervozvanny was anchored at the quay wall. A boat commanded by Lieutenant Gordon Steele fired a torpedo hit in the forward part of the port side. Consequences: underwater breach, 4 by 2 meters, 4 compartments flooded, armor plates shifted, casualties, 1 killed, 2 wounded, report from Commander L.M. Haller. The torpedo hit in the area of frames 12 to 17. Water is entering 4 compartments. List of 3 degrees to port. Managed with own resources. Historical significance: the first successful torpedo boat attack on a major warship in its base. Chapter 7. Final years and end. 7.1. Repair and preservation. After the torpedo hit, the ship was put into restorative repair. But the conditions of post-war devastation did not allow for full restoration. Shortage of materials and skilled workers. Lack of funding. Priority given to new construction. Obsolescence of the ship. From 1920 to 1922, the ship was used as floating barracks for sailors, storage for weapons and equipment, training base for cadets. 7.2. Use of armament. Part of the armament found new uses: 120mm guns, installed on ships of river flotillas, used on land fronts, transferred for coastal defense. 203mm turrets, installed at forts Krasnoflotsky and Pervomaisky, participated in the defense of Leningrad in 1941 to 1944. Fire control instruments. Transferred to monitors of the Amur flotilla, used in the creation of new systems. 7.3. Removal from fleet lists. On December 15, 1923, the ship was handed over to the State Fund Commission for dismantling. On February 8, 1924, it was officially stricken from the lists of the naval forces of the Baltic Sea. Dismantling process. 1924 to 1925, dismantled for scrap metal in Kronstadt. Surviving mechanisms used in the national economy. Part of the armor was melted down for new construction. Irony of fate. The metal of the last Russian pre-dreadnought went towards building the new Soviet industry. Chapter 8. Historical assessment and significance. 8.1. Tactical and technical analysis. Strengths: powerful armor, one of the best in the world. Strong armament, 18 guns of 120mm caliber and above, good stability. System of 11 compartments. Structural reliability, Served 12 years without major accidents. Weaknesses: obsolete power plant, reciprocating engines instead of turbines. Low speed: 18.5 knots versus 21 plus on newer ships. Mixed caliber armament, complicated fire control, protracted construction. 7 years, during which the ship became obsolete. 8.2. Place in classification. The Andrei Pervozvanny belonged to the class of semi-dreadnoughts or pre-dreadnoughts, a transitional type between classic pre-dreadnoughts and dreadnoughts. Counterparts in other fleets: England, Lord Nelson, France, Danton, Austria, Hungary, Radetzky, Japan, Aki, Satsuma, Germany. Deutschland, distinctive feature of the Russian ship, the most powerful armor in its class. 8.3. Influence on shipbuilding development. The Andrei Pervozvanny project was an important milestone. Design experience used in creating the Sevastopol-class dreadnoughts armor system became a standard for subsequent projects. Development of technologies for producing large turret installations. Operational experience helped identify requirements for new ships. Academician A.N. Krylov noted, "The Andrei Pervozvanny was the last breath of the battleship era and the first step towards the creation of true battleships." 8.4. Lessons for naval strategy. The ship's history taught important lessons. The danger of prolonged construction in rapidly changing conditions, the importance of a single main caliber for battleships, the necessity of speed as a primary tactical quality, the importance of standardization of armament and machinery. Admiral N.N. Amelko's conclusion: the Andrei Pervozvanny was a victim of a transitional period. It was built for a war that had already ended, according to concepts that were already outdated, and was commissioned when completely different ships were already needed. Chapter 9. People and Destinies. 9.1. Ships' commanders. The gallery of commanders reflects Russia's turbulent history. Vsevolod Fyodorovich Rudnev, 1904 to 1906, hero of the Varyag battle. Pavel Ivanovich Novitsky, 1906 to 1907, artillery specialist Konstantin Lvovich Ergomychev, 1907, Tsushima veteran Mikhail Vladimirovich Bubnov, 1907 to 1908, future chief of the Naval General Staff Alan Fyodorovich Shvank, 1910 to 1911, first commander in service Alexander Pavlovich Zelenoy, 1912 to 1915, commanded during WWI Georgy Ottovich Gad, 1915 to 1917, last Imperial Commander Ilya Ilyich Lodizhensky, 1917, accepted the Revolution Lev Mikhailovich Haller, 1918 to 1919, hero of the ice campaign Mikhail Vladimirovich Viktorov, 1920s, last commander. 9.2. Notable persons who served on the ship: Ivan Timofeyevich Kuryokin, 1897 to 1951, future Major General of the Intendant Service, served as signalman and storekeeper in 1918 to 1921. Leonid Sergeyevich Sobolev, 1898 to 1971, famous Soviet writer, author of Capital Repair, served as navigator in 1918. 9.3. Fates of the crew. Statistics. Total served: about 1,500 people over the ship's history. Killed in action: 4 people died from disease, 12 people repressed in the 1930s, 7 people lived to old age, about 300 people. Notable feature: a high percentage of former sailors from the Andrei Pervozvanny continued their service in the Soviet fleet. Chapter 10. Legacy and Memory. 10.1. In Culture and Art. The Andrei Pervozvanny left its mark in literature. Mentioned in works by L. Sobolev, A. Novikov Pryboy painting, paintings by marine artists, cinema, newsreel footage in films about the Civil War, philately, postage stamps depicting the ship 10.2, museum significance surviving relics, ship's bell, in the Central Naval Museum fire control instruments, in the Artillery Museum, photographs and documents, in the Navy Archives model of the ship, in the Kronstadt Museum 10.3. Historical reconstructions, scale models in collections of naval enthusiasts, computer reconstructions of the ship's appearance, scientific publications on the ship's history. Chapter 11. Conclusion. Lessons of history. The Andrei Pervozvanny traversed a path symbolizing the fate of an entire era of the Russian fleet, from its keel laying in the days of the greatest humiliation at Tsushima, through prolonged construction during years of searching and rethinking, to brief service in a war for which it was no longer entirely suitable, and to a heroic old age during the years of revolution and civil war. This was a ship of a transitional time, between sail and steam, between armor and speed, between the Empire and Soviet power. Its main lesson: technology becomes obsolete faster than it can be built. A fleet must look not to today, but to tomorrow. Every ship is a bet on the future, and that bet must be correct. In the memory of the Russian fleet, the Andrei Pervozvanny will remain as the last pre-dreadnought of the Empire, a symbol of transition to a new era, a participant in great historical events, a lesson for future shipbuilders. Ships, like people, have their own destiny. The destiny of the Andrei Pervozvanny was to be a bridge between the past and the future of the Russian fleet. It fulfilled its mission. Admiral N.N. Amelko. Appendix 1. Tactical and technical characteristics. Parameter. Value displacement, 18,590 tons. Full load, length 140.2 meters, beam 24.4 meters, draft 8.5 meters power, 17,635 horsepower speed, 18.5 knots, range 2,100 miles, 12 knots. Crew 957 people, armament 4 times 305 millimeters, 14 by 203 millimeters, 12 by 120 millimeters, armor belt 79 to 216 millimeters, decks 32 to 40 millimeters. Appendix 2, chronology of main events, April 28, 1905. Keel laying October 7, 1906. Launch, April 30, 1912. Entry into service, September 8, 1914. Start of service in WWI November 7, 1917. Transfer to the Red Fleet, May 10, 1918. Ice campaign, August 18, 1919. Torpedo hit, December 15, 1923. Handed over for scrapping, February 8, 1924. Stricken from lists.